There are moments in a human life that are like pieces of a mirror suddenly falling down, forcing the mind to look straight at what has been avoided. The biggest question of life usually does not come with a clear voice, but with a heavy feeling when realizing that no matter how long the road is, it ultimately heads toward a single point. That death is not a pessimistic thought but a truth that always stands at the edge of consciousness, waiting for humans to be awake enough to face it. It was precisely that question that once made a young prince stand silently amidst his wealthy life. When he first saw an old man with cloudy eyes, a sick person with a trembling body, and a motionless corpse amidst the bustling crowd, no luxury could obscure that scene before his eyes. Like mist dissolving when the early morning light shines through, from that moment, the world was no longer intact as before. The young person born in silk suddenly understood that no life, no matter how carefully wrapped, can avoid the cruel but precise law of nature. That truth did not make him collapse but opened up an extraordinary journey, not because of wanting to run away from death, nor because of wanting to find eternity somewhere outside, but because of the aspiration to look straight into the essence of life at that moment. The question of why live if one will eventually die is no longer a question smelling of despair but becomes a door leading to opening. From other civilizations, many intellects have also stood before a similar door. Some think that facing death makes life meaningless. Others find that it is the finiteness that forces humans to live responsibly. Among them, there are Western thoughts that always question the value of life, knowing that death lies ready on the path. But they all share a common point. No one can deny it. A sage once said that an unexamined life is not worth living, as if looking straight at the limit is what creates the depth of each human life. An emperor once reminded himself every day that death could come at any time, not as a threat, but as a bell calling humans back to wakefulness. However, the perspective of Buddhism is different. It does not avoid, does not emphasize pessimism, nor does it deify death. When facing this truth, the Dharma does not lead humans into fear but wakes them up from delusion. There is a sentence in ancient scriptures reminding that those who do not realize that death is certain will live in disputes, while those who understand that will let go of meaningless quarrels. That is not just a moral teaching but a key opening up inner transformation, because when seeing finite time, things thought to be important suddenly become small, while things never noticed become clearer than ever. In the silence of that realization, a strange thing happens. Death is no longer an absolute end but a mirror reflecting how we are living. A day can pass quietly or become precious depending on this view. When knowing that each moment could be the last, humans naturally urge themselves to live more fully, more kindly, and more awake. Petty disputes no longer have enough strength to hold back the mind, and rivalry becomes hollow, while compassion, though small, carries a new weight. Also from that view, the journey of the young prince was not a run to escape the truth but a search to understand why that truth makes humans suffer, not because death takes away the meaning of life, but because the clinging of humans to what is not sustainable makes them lose their way. Realizing this, he stepped onto the path of meditation, illuminating the essence of everything that had once made his mind waver. That journey did not aim to find a place without death, but to understand why life is so important, even when death is certain. Impermanence to ordinary people sounds like a warning, but for those who see through the essence, impermanence is the reason to live meaningfully. Because if everything lasted forever, nothing would remain precious. It is the fading away that makes each moment irreplaceable. It is the finiteness that makes human choices carry weight. And it is that very realization that makes the smallest action able to become the imprint of an awakened life. Death does not erase the value of life. It only erases the illusion that humans have infinite time to delay clarity. Every day, every breath, Every thought can be the starting point of transformation. No one knows beforehand what will come, but everyone can know clearly what is happening in the present moment when living with that view. Life becomes a gift no one can take lightly. It is no longer a series of days drifting by, but every beat that can create a new direction. It is not death that makes life become meaningless. Conversely, precisely because of death, life has value. And that is the point where the prince's journey turned into the journey of an enlightened being. Because when facing the unavoidable, he did not choose despair but chose understanding. That understanding became a light leading the way for countless people through centuries, helping them see that fear is not destiny, but just a curtain covering the truth. The deeper one goes into the question of death, the image of life appears with sharper lines. Humans often fear the end, but that very fear makes them never understand the nature of the journey they are living. When the young prince realized the fragility of human life, he did not stop at the initial shock. That shock became the motivation to look back at what humans still call happiness. In the palace, everything was preserved as if time could not touch it. But just taking one step outside, he saw where the body would go, where the breath stops, where all fame returns to silence. That moment opened up another thought. If everything ends in the same way, what makes humans still try, still suffer, still fight every day? Does the value of life lie not in how long it lasts, but in what humans do with that short period of time? This view seems simple, yet it contains a reversal that awakens the consciousness. Because if death is the inevitable end, then humans cannot find meaning in prolongation but can only find meaning in wakefulness. From here, a silent movement and the consciousness takes place. Humans realize that what makes them lose their way is not death, but the clinging to things that cannot be kept. They argue to defend a viewpoint, but that viewpoint will be lost when they die. They try to accumulate wealth, but that wealth does not follow them. They see themselves as important amidst the crowd, but the crowd will forget them very quickly when looking straight at that reality. Everything thought to be solid becomes soft, and the truth is revealed. Suffering is not born from death, but is born from holding tight to things that are not sustainable. This very point is what makes the Dharma become different. Instead of seeking to evade death with unrealistic promises, the Buddha's teaching points out that death is not the enemy. The real enemy is ignorance, is not knowing the nature of life. When ignorance is still present, death is looked at with fearful eyes. But when wisdom is lit up, death becomes a reflection point to live more awake. And precisely in that reflection, another truth is realized. Not everyone looks at death and sees meaninglessness. There are thinkers from the West who have stepped close to this truth. One person said that the most important question in philosophy is whether life is worth living or not. Another affirmed that life only has value when humans look back at it deeply. But all those approaches, no matter how subtle, still stop at the boundary of a purely rational view. What makes the Buddha's path become different is that he did not just look with reason but with comprehensive wakefulness. When realizing death is certain, he did not ask if life is worth living or not. He asked why humans suffer. That question does not aim to lead to pessimism, but aims to open a path to liberation. Because when understanding the cause of suffering, humans can end it. From there, death is no longer the source of fear but a natural truth like breath. This wakefulness completely changes the human view of time. A day is no longer a you need to wait for the future but an opportunity to live in the most meaningful way. A conversation, a kind act, a moment of letting go of anger, all become ways to touch the freedom that the Dharma aims for. That freedom is not escaping death, but escaping the fear of death. When no longer afraid, the mind is no longer bound. When not bound, life becomes clear. These things do not just exist in ancient teachings. They echo in modern life where humans still face the same insecurity. An emperor once reminded himself every morning that death could come at any time, not to sow fear but to live without hesitation. A sage wrote that an unexamined life is not worth living. Those words reflect somewhat the truth that the Buddha saw very early on. Death forces humans to look back at themselves, and that very look is what creates value. But not everyone is brave enough to see this. Some run away into short-lived pleasures. Some try to fill the emptiness with lust, with fighting, with achievements. However, when night falls, they still feel a strange silence. That silence is not born from material lack, but from the absence of meaning. Precisely in that silence, the question of death returns not as a threat, but as a call forcing the consciousness to wake up. That is also when the truth that the prince saw years ago becomes clear. Life is not meaningless because there is death. Life becomes meaningless only when humans live without understanding why they suffer. And when they do not understand, they repeat choices that make them far from peace. Conversely, when understanding that impermanence is the nature, they will know what should be kept, what should be let go of, what is truly important. Death does not make life become small. It makes life become real. It makes every breath noticeable. It makes kindness urgent. It makes understanding become light in the darkness. And that very light led the prince to step out of the palace not to find immortality but to find liberation from ignorance. In that moment, the greatest journey of mankind began. The journey to find the nature of suffering, its cause, and the way to end it from the door of death. The door of wisdom opens, and from there, life is no longer a series of days heading toward the end, but an opportunity to understand more deeply each of one's own steps. There are questions that cannot be answered with a concise sentence because its vastness exceeds all familiar concepts. The meaning of life is one such question. Not because it is too vague, but because it touches the very bottom of the insecurity that humans carry in their hearts when looking at death. People panic when looking at suffering. People avoid it. But that very avoidance makes them never understand the essence of what is happening inside themselves. Amidst that context, a teaching rings out, simple as breath, but deep as an abyss. Only teaching about suffering and the path to end suffering, not lecturing on the lofty meaning of life, not opening up promises of a glorious future, just looking straight at what everyone experiences but does not want to face. Because when understanding suffering clearly, understanding its cause clearly, understanding the ability to end it clearly, humans will naturally see the meaning of life revealed naturally. Suffering is not a complaint. Suffering is a state of simmering unease in every moment that humans think is normal. It appears when expecting something to last forever while everything changes. It appears when people try to hold on to fleeting emotions as if they could stay forever. From that clinging, dissatisfaction is born not because life is too cruel but because humans demand things life cannot respond to. They want eternity from what is inherently impermanent. They want certainty from what is inherently fluctuating. When saying that suffering has a cause, that is not to convict humans. Conversely, it opens up hope. If there is a cause, it can be transformed. Craving, the desire to cling, is precisely the rope binding humans to the cycle of insecurity. It is not that desire is absolutely bad, but the lack of understanding of its nature makes the mind swept into a vortex with no end. Just one expectation not met, the mind immediately wavers. Just one thing lost, the mind is immediately in pain. All rise from a misunderstanding that happiness can be found by holding tight to things that inherently cannot be held. But if there is a cause, there is also a cessation. The concept of the cessation of suffering is not dreaming of a perfect world but the real ability of the consciousness when it sees the nature of all phenomena without being deluded. That cessation is called absolute stillness, not because nothing exists anymore, but because the mind no longer chases after anything. The mind is no longer shaken by the fear of what is lost and the craving for what has not come. In that quietness, humans find freedom not dependent on circumstances. From this truth, a path is opened, not a path of theory but a path of practice. 8 familiar but profound elements leading from the darkness of ignorance to the light of wisdom. Nothing in this path promises miraculous salvation. All require wakefulness every moment, observation of every breath, honesty with oneself. It is like a doctor pointing out the disease, explaining the cause, and offering a treatment method. The teacher cannot take the medicine for the patient. Each person must walk on their own feet. In the history of human thought, there were also people who once saw a part of this truth. A philosopher once realized that endless desire is the source of suffering, and because of that life becomes full of tragedy. But he stopped in darkness because he did not see the ability to transcend. Meanwhile, what the Buddha pointed out was not a dark picture of life. It was an opening, where suffering can end when humans know how to live with clear awareness. Like survivors in harsh circumstances who once realized that whoever has a reason to live will have the strength to overcome every challenge. The difference lies in the fact that that reason does not come from outside. It comes from deep understanding of the nature of life. When understanding that the purpose of the path is wakefulness, humans feel inner strength rise even when standing amidst adversity. That wakefulness is not only the act of looking straight at suffering, it is also the act of nurturing qualities that make the mind lighter. Kindness, patience, non-judgmental observation, all lead the mind away from invisible bindings that humans create for themselves. A kind act can be small, but in the view of the Dharma, it has profound transformative power. Because every time the mind knows to think of others, it expands toward freedom. This makes the meaning of life no longer something that must be found by distant trips or by the accumulation of knowledge. It lies right in the ability to reduce suffering for oneself and for others. Every mindful breath reduces the restlessness of the mind. Every time looking deep into an emotion makes it dissolve like a cloud. Every time letting go of clinging lightens the shoulders. All are steps forward on the path heading toward liberation. When understanding this, the question of the meaning of life becomes clear. No need for an answer in words. Just need to look at the change in the mind when a thought is less greedy, an action is less harmful, a moment is less ignorant. That change is precisely the meaning, not the meaning given by others, but the meaning found in the maturity of the consciousness itself. Humans often think that living meaningfully is doing something great, but with the Dharma, the greatest meaning lies in the ability to look straight at suffering and in suffering. A moment of true understanding can be more valuable than 100 years living in ignorance, and in that moment, humans begin to see the purpose of a whole life. When observing deeper into the operation of the mind, humans begin to see something that seems obvious, but is forgotten. Everyone wishes for happiness, but the path they take sometimes leads to insecurity. Not because they choose wrong, but because they do not realize the nature of the things they hold. A relationship, a reputation, an asset, even pleasant emotions, all are treated as if they could exist further. But when time makes everything change, the mind immediately wavers. That wavering is not due to the outside world, but due to the misunderstanding that impermanent things can become eternal. In the moment of seeing through that, a type of gentle wisdom rises. Not the sharp wisdom of debate, but the wisdom born from silent observation. When seeing clearly that all conditioned things change, the mind clings less, and when clinging less, suffering begins to disintegrate, not in a sudden way, but in the way rain soaks into the soil bit by bit, layer by layer. Insecurities are gradually resolved. Therefore, Understanding suffering does not make life become dark. Conversely, it opens up a direction full of hope. If suffering were merely a sentence for humans, then life would become meaningless. But suffering can end. And so, every breath is an opportunity to step closer to freedom. This is not a promise for a few chosen people. This is a path for anyone who can look into their mind with honesty. In the flow of history, there were voices from other eras that also realized that life contains unavoidable imperfection. But those voices often stopped at pessimism. Some saw life full of unsatisfactoriness and concluded that suffering is an unchangeable nature. But what they missed was the ability to transcend, the ability for the mind to see the cause and let go of that cause. This is precisely the point where the Buddha's teaching surpasses all philosophies based on reason. It does not stop at describing the problem, it points out the way. And that way does not guide humans to the denial of life. It guides to awakened living. Every time craving is reduced, the mind lessens its burden. Every time anger is reduced, the mind opens up a spacious space. Every time ignorance is reduced, the mind brightens a little more. Those changes are small but sustainable, like a lamp lit in the darkness. The light does not need to be big immediately to change the room. Just a ray of light is enough to make humans see the way. In modern times, a thinker who once survived fierce circumstances said that having a reason to live will endure almost every circumstance. That reason in the Dharma is precisely understanding and compassion, not motivation coming from ambition or the search for recognition, but motivation coming from the desire to escape suffering for oneself and for others when living with that purpose. The mind becomes strong in a way no one can see with naked eyes but can feel clearly in each choice. Not only modern humans, but also ancients once glimpsed a part of this truth. A saying from ancient scriptures reminds that just one day seeing the rise and fall of all things is more valuable than 100 years living in ignorance. This is not to exalt theoretical understanding, but to say that a moment of true wakefulness can change the entire way humans look at the world when seeing clearly the nature of impermanence. The mind is no longer swept into the flow of greed, hatred, and delusion which always makes life become heavy. The meaning of life therefore does not lie in grand declarations. It lies in each small action directing the mind toward wisdom and compassion. A kind word helps reduce hurt for others. A minute of listening makes the person in front feel relieved. A moment of not reacting according to habit helps the mind avoid the wave of anger. Those seemingly simple deeds create profound impact, because they reduce the suffering of the practitioner themselves and those involved. This is not dreaming of an ideal world. This is what humans can do in every living day. And every time it is performed, the meaning of life appears in that very moment, not in the future, not in a distant place, but right here, because the deepest purpose of the path is wakefulness, and wakefulness always begins in the present. When understanding this, humans will see that suffering is no longer a destiny chasing them. Suffering becomes a teacher pointing out where the mind is clinging, where the mind has not seen clearly. Thanks to that, every time facing difficulty, they no longer feel punished but feel it is an opportunity to look deeper. This is not baseless optimism. This is the truth that many people have self-verified. Wherever suffering arises, there is also the ability to transform, and in that transformation, the path appears clearly. Not a path running away from life, but a path helping humans live more clearly. Not because of wanting to reach some absolute, but because of wanting to reduce bindings in the mind. When bindings dissolve, a type of natural peace appears without needing to search, without forced effort. It comes from seeing everything clearly as they are. This is precisely the reason making the seemingly simple teaching have durable vitality through many centuries. It does not depend on culture or era. It touches the most common point of humans, the thirst to escape suffering. And when understanding that it is possible, the mind begins to walk with new steadfastness, no longer struggling in the darkness of ignorance but heading toward the light of wakefulness. There are people who once sat in silence and asked themselves if their life had meaning or not, especially when looking back at the journey past and realizing that they have not touched any peak of enlightenment. That question is not only present in ancient scripture pages, it creeps into the mind of ordinary people, people doing familiar work every day, people taking care of family, people facing very ordinary worries. But the strange thing is that the Dharma itself brings an answer, making the human mind lighter. No need to become a saint to live a valuable life. Meaning does not only lie at the mountain peak, it lies right in every step heading toward it. Looking from that angle, the path becomes closer. No one is left behind because of not being capable enough to attain enlightenment in one life. Enlightenment in the Dharma is not a gift reserved for the few but is a potential present in every human. Some bloom fast, some need more time, but no seed is useless. Every time practicing kindness, every time speaking truthful words, every time looking back at oneself with wakefulness, that seed is watered a little more in long-standing traditions. People often say that sometimes one life is not enough to step to liberation. That is not to make humans discouraged, but for them to understand that every small action accumulates energy for subsequent steps. Charity, compassion, upright lifestyle, all become a silent stream nurturing the soil of the mind. No good deed is wasted. Even if it is just a smile relieving someone's sadness, it still has weight in the operation flow of karma. But there is also another view, more open, from traditions viewing enlightenment as something that can happen right in this life. No need to wait for the distant future. No need to pass many lives to light up the light. Just need a mind wide enough to place the benefit of others above oneself. The path has changed direction. There are people who choose to live like that. They do not seek liberation for themselves first, but choose to stay in the midst of life, acting as a refuge for others. Their life does not need to reach absolute perfection to have meaning. Service is precisely the meaning. From that perspective, an act full of compassion by an ordinary person has value no less than a deep meditation period. A doctor caring for a patient in every rapid breath. A father staying up at night beside a high-fever child. A teacher patiently teaching a lesson to a slow understanding student. None of them can erase sickness, or old age or death, but they reduce suffering even just a little, and that very action has become light. Just like the old saying that lighting a lamp for others also makes one's own path brighter. Sometimes the helper does not realize that, but the light still spreads, carrying warmth without needing a declaration. The meaning of life appears simply like that, not through complex theories, but through each action relieving the heaviness of life. And then another truth becomes clear. Meaning does not come from status or wealth accumulation. A simple life, but full of care, can be deeper than a showy life. Many people keep thinking they must create something great to prove their value. But when looking at the nature of existence, all achievements are worn down by time. Only the impact of kindness remains. This is not a consolation. This is the natural law of the mind. Anything leading to peace nurtures wakefulness. When placing oneself in the flow of time, humans also understand that life is just a chapter in a much longer book. Not to create fictional comfort, to remind that each chapter has its own meaning. Even if not reaching the highest part in this book, the journey is still the foundation for the next chapter. And so, this life becomes precious not because it is eternal, but because it is a rare opportunity to move closer to inner freedom. A teacher once said that life is like a boat, hard to obtain when already in hand. The only reasonable thing is to use it well. No one knows how much longer the boat will dissolve into the waves. But while still drifting, every stroke can take humans to the other shore. From here, another question often appears: if all are impermanent, what makes life valuable? The answer lies in the very connection between all phenomena. Every thought, every action causes a movement. Nothing is lost, nothing is meaningless. When the mind gives rise to kindness, the world changes in a way that the naked eye does not see. But karma still records when the mind gives rise to anger. Insecurity spreads and creates waves not easy to stop. Therefore, every choice of humans is important, not because the universe watches them, but because they themselves are shaping their future through each moment. And also from this connection, another thing is seen clearly. Life is not directionless chaos. Every action is the cause for a result. Every result leads to a new direction. There is no punishment from outside, only the operation flow of cause and effect. Humans are not forced to follow a predetermined fate. They follow what they themselves have created in every thought, every word, every action. Realizing this, life is no longer a series of days drifting indefinitely. It becomes a conscious journey. When understanding that life operates according to intertwined conditions, humans begin to look at the world with different eyes, no longer seeing events as separate as before. A wind blowing past also has its cause. A sadness rising also has deep layers to trace back. A chance meeting can open a turning point. Everything happening in and around humans is created by countless causes and conditions. When a cause changes, the condition changes along, and the result also changes along. That subtlety makes life become quiet but rich in meaning, because every smallest choice also contributes to creating the future. In the light zone of that awareness, death is no longer seen as the final black hole swallowing everything, but as a natural part of a larger flow. If life only ends in a moment and then all vanishes, every human effort would easily become meaningless. But the Dharma does not look at the world like that. The flow of the mind continues like the way a story moves from this chapter to another chapter. What humans do in the current chapter will affect the next chapter, and that very concept makes each living moment become precious, not because of fearing the end but because of understanding the value of each segment of the road. Meanwhile, many people still mistakenly think that understanding impermanence can lead to an attitude of giving up, losing motivation to live. But reality is the opposite. Only when knowing that everything changes do humans cherish what they have. A meal with loved ones becomes fuller when understanding that it is unknown how much longer such moments still exist. A peaceful morning can become a priceless gift when knowing that life is always fluctuating. Impermanence is not a destroyer of meaning. It is precisely the reason making meaning appear. Looking at this, the practitioner will see that meaning does not lie in immortality. It lies in the ability to live fully in this moment. When the mind is present in a true way, whether sweeping the yard, washing dishes, or sitting in silence, every action becomes vivid. There are masters who once said that just washing dishes with wakefulness can also become a profound practice. Not because that action is sacred, but because the awakened mind is the sacred thing. The mind makes the action meaningful, not the other way around. And then the question seeming most basic becomes the key. So what happens if humans never attain enlightenment in this life? Is their life meaningless? The answer is still no. Every seed of wakefulness sown becomes the foundation for development later. No effort is lost. Moments of clear mind, times compassion rises, minutes letting go of attachment all create a different direction for the mind. Even if not seeing the result immediately, the karma stream still records, the path still opens. The meaning of life, accordingly, no longer depends on humans reaching the ultimate goal in a specific time. It depends on how they walk. A person might not become an enlightened being, but if every day they reduce suffering for others, that life is complete in its own way. A person might not achieve great strides in meditation, but if they live with honesty and uprightness, that still creates value. There is no good deed small enough to be insignificant. From here meaning becomes simple but powerful, living to reduce suffering. From there, humans understand that there is no need to conquer the world, just need to overcome oneself, no need to create a great mark, just need to make the heart lighter every day. When the mind is light, the world also becomes light along, because the world humans experience is precisely the reflection of their mind. However, there is also another danger appearing when humans understand impermanence and non-self. They can fall into the thought that if nothing exists independently or permanently, then everything is meaningless. This is the fragile boundary between wisdom and nihilism. But the Dharma never leads humans to nihilism. On one side is the view that there is an eternal entity lying behind all phenomena. On the other side is the view that nothing exists, so all efforts are useless. Both are extremes. The real path lies in the middle. This is the marvelous point of the middle way. It does not deny the world, nor does it assign absolute value to it. It recognizes that all phenomena only exist when conditions are sufficient, and because they exist according to conditions, human actions always have influence. A thought full of good intent can change one's mind and then spread out in the way one treats others. A harmful action also causes similar consequences in the opposite direction. Therefore, living in wakefulness is not standing outside life, but participating in life with clarity. In the light of the middle way, all wrong concepts gradually disintegrate. There is no fixed self to protect, no absolute emptiness to rely on, only the flow of causes and conditions, where each choice creates the rhythm of life. Therefore, living responsibly is not an imposed duty, but a natural result of understanding. When knowing that current action is the cause of the future, humans will naturally choose wakefulness instead of ignorance. This makes death, which is inherently the biggest obsession, become something looked at with calm eyes. No one can avoid death, but everyone can decide how they live before death comes. And that very choice makes the meaning. A person can die young but live deeply. A person can live long but sink in ignorance. Time does not decide the value of life. How people use time is the deciding factor. When the middle way is understood correctly, humans will see that life does not need to be perfect to have meaning. It just needs to be true. Each moment living with wisdom and kindness is a step forward on the path of liberation, and that makes life, whether short or long, become a valuable journey.